Hi, everyone. My name is Emmy Amoretti, and I'm Assistant Director of our ACU Online Writing Center. And I'm presenting tonight with my wonderful coworker, Sarah Tabawada, who is our multilingual specialist at the Online Writing Center. Say hi, Sarah.
Ahoy, everybody.
Ahoy, Sarah. During tonight's webinar, we're going to be discussing how to format lists and tables in APA style, which will make it easier to communicate complex information to an audience. Keep in mind that tomorrow we'll send out links to the recording and the slide deck for the webinar, and the green links to the resources in the slide deck will be active. The slide deck's also going to include some really handy formatting checklists for tables and lists that we'll go through during the webinar. So it will be a good future resource. During the presentation, please feel free to type any questions into the chat, and we will pause as needed to do our best to answer them. So here are our learning objectives for the webinar. By the end of tonight's session, we will understand how to format lists in APA style, understand how to format tables in APA style, and we'll workshop NUTR 627's Week 2 Assignment 2, the 3-day menu. So first, we're going to start with learning objective 1, understand how to format lists in APA style. So a list, we are all familiar with them, whether we write our grocery list or a to-do list, but those are all sets of related points. They're things you need to buy at the store or things you need to do. So in your APA formatted papers, lists also help your readers better understand a related set of points. And the list can be in a sentence, or it can be part of a paragraph. There are 4 types of lists in APA format, and we're going to go over all of them today. There are simple lists, lettered lists, ABC, bulleted lists, and numbered lists, 1, 2, 3. So APA actually outlines specific guidelines for punctuating and structuring each type of list. You can't just use a bulleted list, or you can't just use a numbered list. There are rules you have to follow to determine what kind of list you're supposed to use. You can check out pages 189 through 190 of the 7th edition APA manual or the official APA website on lists for more help with the guidelines. So simple lists, those are just lists of ideas that form part of a sentence. So for instance, key nutrients include carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Here, the list is carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. It's a simple list, and we have commas between all the list items, including before the last one, fats, comma, and protein. So this comma before the final list item is called the serial or Oxford comma, and it is required in APA format. So if the list already contains items, if the list already contains commas, making it more of a complex list, you can separate the items with semicolons. So here we have the first item is must consider their intake of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. So there's already commas between carbohydrates, fats, and protein. That means we need to put a semicolon after that so that it doesn't run into the next item in the list. Then we have monitor blood sugar levels, semicolon. And finally, engage in healthy habits like exercise, comma, stress management, and not smoking. The semicolon just creates a bit of a stronger pause so that the reader can tell where item group 1 stops and then the next one starts. Another important thing to consider about lists is that all the listed items have to be presented in what we call parallel structure. Parallel structure means that the items have to have the same grammatical form. So for instance, all the items might be nouns. In the first example, the items are carbohydrates, fats, and protein, and they're all nouns. But in the second example, we have another example of how things might be structured. And in this case, we're separating verb phrases in the list. Each of these things that we've listed starts with a verb. So individuals with diabetes must what? They must first consider their intake of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. Second, monitor blood sugar levels. And third, engage in healthy habits like exercise and so on. But each of those words in bold is a verb. Each phrase begins with a verb. So that makes the list parallel.
But it's also important, all of those verbs are in the same tense, because it would get a little confusing if we had them in different, if we started with consider and then switched to monitoring.
That's true. In this case, they're all, let's see, third person present tense. Well, no, they go with must. So must is the helping verb. Must what? Consider. They're the infinitive form there. Good point, Sarah. Now let's look at lettered lists, which are very, very similar. Basically, you use a lettered list to draw more attention to and help readers understand the separate parallel items in a complex list. So we could take that sentence that we had on the previous page with the semicolons between it and use lowercase letters. So here's another example. You use lowercase letters in parentheses before each item. So the parentheses, they go in front of the lowercase letter and after it. You never put numbers in parentheses in APA, and you don't just put the parenthesis on one side. It has to be enclosed. So here's an example. Individuals who participated in the study were asked to A, record their daily intake of carbohydrates, fats, and protein. B, record blood sugar levels on a prescribed schedule. And C, participate in daily journaling activities. So here we use the lettered list because while we're still containing the list inside a linear sentence, we want to make sure the reader really stops and pauses to see what the three things are that we want them to attend to. And keep in mind that if you already have commas in the lettered list items, even though the letters are there, you're still going to use semicolons between just to make sure you're following the grammatical structure the way it should be. The third type of list in APA is pretty exciting because it has variations. It's a bulleted list. You use a bulleted list when you want to draw visual attention to related items without implying the items go in a certain order. So if you had a list that needed to be chronological, you would not use a bulleted list. Or if you had a list where things needed to be in order of importance from most to least important, you would not use a bulleted list. That's when you would use a numbered list. But for now, we're going to talk about the ones that don't need to be in a certain order. When you make a bulleted list, make sure you create it using the bullets function in Word. That is an APA guideline. They spell it out in the textbook. Do not manually create your list. The bullets function in Word will also indent the list, and it will make sure you keep your list double spaced as you're typing. The bullets you use, this is a point of flexibility in APA. It can consist of small circles, dashes, squares, or even other things. So you can use any type of bullet that you want per APA. If you're publishing for a journal or writing for a course, you may want to use the bullet that the journal or your instructor says to use. But APA is wide open about what kind of bullets you use. Items in a bulleted list may be complete sentences, or they can be words or phrases. But like all other lists, the items have to be parallel in structure. So these are the options I talked about. Your bulleted list can have all complete sentences, or it can have all words and phrases. But regardless, it has to be all one or all the other. And if it's words or phrases, those phrases have to be the same grammatical structure. If the first one starts with a verb, all the other ones need to start with a verb. If they're all nouns, all of them have to be nouns. Or if the first one is a noun, the rest of them also have to be nouns. So based on what your bullets consist of, that's going to dictate how you punctuate a bulleted list. So here we have a bulleted list that consists of sentences. In a systematic review, Craddock et al. Found that several factors impact the ability of individuals with diabetes to control their hemoglobin A1C levels in the context of randomized controlled trials. Bullet 1. Participants may have had underlying biological factors affecting obesity or appetite regulation. Bullet 2. Participants may have attempted to change multiple diabetes-related behaviors instead of focusing on one at a time. Bullet 3. Interventions were applied in different sequences. Bullet 4. Some interventions may have better suited some individuals. So here, these are all complete sentences. So even though they're bulleted, we begin each one with a capital letter, and we finish it with a period or other appropriate end punctuation. Now let's look at the examples of what to do if you're using words or phrases. Individuals may struggle to apply diabetes-related interventions for various reasons. Colon. Level of self-discipline, lack of knowledge regarding healthy eating habits, daily stress, impact of family members, inability to manage the social significance of food. So here, these bullets are all parallel in structure. They start with, or they are noun phrases. If the bulleted items are short and simple, you do not have to have punctuation at the end. And you also should start them with a lowercase letter unless it happens to be a proper noun. So all of these are lowercase and none of them have punctuation at the end because they're pretty short, simple words/phrases that we're presenting here. Now that's option 2 of what to do with a bulleted list. Let's look at option 3. Here we've got a list of phrases they're more complex. Individuals with diabetes described their barriers to achieving healthy dietary practice within the context of 4 themes. Addiction, in which they compared their relationship with food to addiction to drugs or alcohol. Semicolon. Cheating, in which they viewed eating unhealthy foods as weakness. Semicolon. Emotions, in which they described food as a source of comfort when faced with negative feelings. Semicolon. And unwillingness to change, in which they stated a disregard for clinicians' advice. So here we have a longer, more complex items. You can see that each one already includes a comma. So I've got addiction, comma, in which they compared their relationship to food, blah, 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 semicolon. If the bullets are longer or more complex and they're phrases, you insert punctuation as though the bullets were not there. So if we were writing this in a sentence without the bullets, we'd have the comma within each item, and then we'd have the semicolons between them. And so we have that here. And you can also see that we have a period at the end of the whole shebang because that's how we would punctuate it if it were in a sentence. Now we're going to move on to list type number 4, which is a numbered list. Remember I said that you use a numbered list when you want to display items in a series. In other words, they need to be in a certain order, be it chronological order, order of steps in a procedure. If they're from most to least important, that's when you need to use a numbered list. You should again create the list using the numbering function in Word, which will also indent the list and help you retain double spacing. Numbered lists are written with Arabic numerals, so standard 1, 2, 3, the way we write them. And you have to follow them with a period. The reason you follow them with a period is that the items in the numbered list have to be complete sentences or paragraphs. So in APA, a numbered list has to be complete sentences. You can't number phrases. You gotta have complete sentences. It is an APA rule. So here's an example. Sampson 2019 translated the STEPS approach, a 5-criteria method for evaluating pharmacotherapy options for type 2 diabetes, into a series of questions. 1, how safe is the medication? 2, how well does the patient tolerate the medication? 3, how effective is the medication? 4, how much does the medication cost? And 5, how simple is the medication's dosing regimen? So here we have these numbered because it goes through a series of steps in order. It's the sequence in which you would evaluate the criteria for the method. If the medication's not safe, you're going to go ahead and throw that out right from the outset. And here, these are complete sentences. We have the number followed by a period and in the complete sentence. And in this case, these are questions. So instead of ending each one with a period, we ended them with a question mark. So here's a fun feature of this webinar, which is that we made some formatting checklists that you can use to check to make sure you're formatting it right. So first, here's the checklist for formatting lists. The first thing you need to do is make sure you used the appropriate type of list to present the information. Use a simple list to list related ideas in your linear text, a lettered list to distinguish each item in a list of related ideas in your linear text, a bulleted list to draw visual attention to items without implying order, and a numbered list to display items in a numbered series. So you want to make sure you pick the right list type rather. If it's a simple list, did you separate all the items, including the last, with commas or semicolons if the list items already contain commas? Does each item reflect the same grammatical structure? For a lettered list, did you separate the items with commas or semicolons as appropriate? Use parallel structure and format the letters in lowercase with parentheses on both sides. So the A in parentheses on both sides. If it's a bulleted list, did you create it using the bullets function in Word? Are the list items parallel, either all complete sentences or all words and phrases with the same grammatical structure? For full sentence bullets, does each begin with a capital letter and end with appropriate end punctuation? For simple words or phrases, does each begin with a lowercase letter and end with no punctuation? For more complex words or phrases, does each begin with a lowercase letter and incorporate appropriate punctuation as though the bullets weren't there? And last was our numbered list. Did you create it using the numbering function in Word? Is each an Arabic numeral followed by a period? And is each item a complete sentence that begins with a capital letter and ends with appropriate end punctuation? So Sarah and I are going to go through using this list a little bit later so you can see how it works. But first, we're going to talk about how to format tables in APA style. Tables are a way to present numbers and or text in visual displays of columns and rows to enable easier interpretation by the reader. In APA format, table presentation is super standardized and it is visually streamlined for increased accessibility. So for instance, in APA, tables are not formatted with vertical lines in the grid. You only use horizontal lines and you use them in very limited circumstances, only to define the top and bottom of the table, to set off column headings, and to set off rows with totals or summary information. We'll show you what that looks like in a minute. When you use a table, you need to be sure to call it out by number in your text. So here's some information we need to share, parentheses, see table 1. That will tell your reader they need to look at table 1 for all the details. The information about tables in APA format is in a pretty large chunk of the text. They have lots of examples for you to look at on pages 195 to 224. And they also have really thorough information on this link to the APA webpage on formatting tables. And now I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Ahoy, yes. So I'm a visual person, so I like seeing. So I thought it would be useful to show everyone how you would actually go about creating a table in your Word document. And luckily, you can literally insert one, and there with the little pink arrow, it shows where the little insert button is, and then you select tables, and you get to basically tell it how many cells you need depending on how much information is going to be in it. And the nice thing is, if you're off by a little, you can go adjusting it. So if you hit the enter key, it will automatically create more space for you to add content. So that's how you get it started. And once you have created it, then you can go and fancify it using the table design feature. And I like color coding things, so I picked this kind of green color to kind of highlight it. Um, and if you see on the left-hand side at the top, there's a little pink arrow that says header row, and that just makes sure that the line is only kind of setting off your headings at the top, which is what APA wants. And then you have a lot of selections of what color you want it, how it's breaking it up. You get to kind of customize it as you see fit, which is sort of nice. And that just kind of allows you to adjust the style, add rows, and make it kind of fancify it or prettify it as you see fit, but also while you're staying within the APA guidelines so that you're not going totally crazy overboard. And I took screenshots of my version of Word. Your version might look a little different. It'll still have all that content. It just might be located or look not exactly like this picture. And if you're having trouble formatting it, you can always make an appointment and we can help walk you through that. I'm
Absolutely.
gonna I'm gonna popcorn it back to you, Emmy.
Thank you. I want that color background in my Word program. Mine, I think, is just blue. But another good feature in the toolbar that Sarah took a picture of for you is the borders function on the right. You can see it says border painter and borders. That, if you click on that, is going to help you eliminate the borders that you don't need in APA, which we're going to look at an example of an APA formatted table now. So here's our sample table. We're going to go through and look at different features of the table to check out how we need to format it. So first, you need to have a table label with the number in bold. So if this were table 1, we would have table 1 in bold. That would be in the same font as the rest of your paper is in, and you can see that the table label and the line under it, and then the table itself at the top. So the label and the line under it with the title is double spaced, just like the rest of your paper. The table label is in bold. Then we have a descriptive title, which is in italics, servings per food group to provide recommended nutrients for patients. So the title of the table is going to be in what we call title case. That means that all the major words, including prepositions of 4 or more letters, are capitalized. So servings, food, group, those are capitalized. But the prepositions per, to, and for are not capitalized because they have fewer than 4 letters. The next feature you will notice, as we mentioned earlier, there are no vertical borders. There are no up and down lines in this table. APA only uses horizontal lines in their tables. And you can see that there are very limited horizontal borders. We have one at the top and at the bottom. We have a border underneath the column headings, underneath, for instance, exchange group over to kilocalories. And we have a border above the totals row, but like in the rows in the middle, there are no horizontal borders because APA considers that to be too visually busy. So we don't have them. Next, in a table, you want to make sure you center all the column headings. So every heading, including the one in the leftmost column, should be centered. The column headings are capitalized in what we call sentence case. So in a sample in a table, that means that you capitalize the first word of the heading, any proper nouns, any nouns followed by numerals or letters, and the first word after an em dash, colon, or end punctuation. So here we've got exchange group. Only exchange is capitalized because group is not a proper noun. And you can see I've used a bulleted list in my capitalized columns box over here. And because the items were complex, I used punctuation and an end period just like I would have if it was in a sentence. See, all of these things go together. Next, you want to make sure you present all your text in the body of the table in sentence case. So the headings are in sentence case, and all the information in the body of the table is in sentence case. The only thing that uses title case when it comes to a table is that label at the top and the title of the table. Everything else is like you're writing it in a sentence. So, for instance, I've got bread/starch. I only have bread capitalized because if this were in a sentence or were a sentence, I would not capitalize starch after the slash. In the body of the table, you need to make sure you left align the information in the leftmost column. So in the leftmost column, the heading is centered, but the text in the table itself is left aligned. So that's why bread and starch all the way down to totals is at the left margin. In all of the other cells in the body of the table, you're usually going to center them unless left aligning them enhances readability. So under protein, I have all those numbers centered under protein. Under kilocalories, those numbers are centered. If you had like a large chunk of text, for instance, if you had a table of participants' responses to some survey questions and they were a paragraph length or several sentences, then you would probably want to left align them and put a little indent to make sure that it's more easily readable. Next, in this table, you can see it is the same exact font as the label and the heading above it. You use the same font in a table as the rest of your paper. Usually that's Times New Roman 12. In our templates, it's Times New Roman 12. In the table itself, you're going to use single, 1.5, or double spacing. I think here I used 1.5. So remember the label and the title, those are double spaced. But within the table, so between that top border and the bottom border, that's when you will use either single, 1.5, or double spacing, just based on how it looks best to you. And if it makes it fit on one page, that would be a time when you use less spacing. If you need to, you can indicate a table note by writing the word note in italics under the table, followed by a period. You only include notes to describe content that can't be understood from the table title or the body alone. So if you had abbreviations that weren't defined in the dictionary, so the person doesn't know what they mean. If you needed to show copyright related to where you found some ideas, or if you borrowed the table in its entirety. So for instance, in this table, I've got G for grams and kcals for kilocalories. Those are defined in Merriam-Webster, so I don't need to include in a note underneath them what those mean. The only thing I added is that servings have been determined based on the diabetes exchange lists because that wasn't really clear from the rest of the table. Table placement. We're going to align all tables with the left margin of your paper. You present a table on one page if possible because it's easier for the reader to keep up with it if they don't have to flip pages back and forth to figure out what's going on. To keep a table on one page, you are allowed to size the font within the table down to as small as 10 points if it's necessary to help it fit on one page. If you absolutely have to have the table on more than one page, you have to repeat the column headings on subsequent pages, and you should never split a row across 2 pages because that just makes it confusing to try to read. To place the tables in your draft overall, you can choose one of 2 options for tables that are essential to understand your text. You can either put each table in your text immediately after the paragraph in which you first mentioned it or called it out. Remember, we said you have to say something like, see table 1, So right after that paragraph, you could put the table right there. If you thought that the tables were kind of distracting, but they still need to be a very essential part of your text, you can put each table on a separate page after the references list. This is not the same as an appendix. If you put a table in an appendix, it's considered supplemental. So here we're talking about if the tables are absolutely essential to what you're trying to say in the paper, but you think they're too distracting right in the paper, then you put them on a separate page after the references list. So here's our fun checklist for formatting tables. Does the table have a bolded label and italicized title, both in title case? Is the table called out in your text? Is it in the same font as the rest of your text? Did you eliminate all the vertical borders? Are the horizontal grid lines only used at the top and bottom to set off rows with headings or summary information? Does each column have a heading that is centered and capitalized in sentence case? Is the body text in the leftmost column left aligned? Is the text in all the other cells centered or left aligned if necessary for readability? Is all the body text in sentence case? Is the table formatted consistently with single 1.5 or double spacing? Did you reduce the font size down to 10 or 11 to see if you can fit it on one page? If you had to use multiple pages, are the column headings repeated? And did you add a note if it requires further explanation? Again, we're going to go through an example of how to use this checklist later, but just having the checklist is pretty handy. So our learning objective 3 relates to workshopping NUTR 627's week 2 assignment to the 3-day menu. You may have noticed that all the tables and the bulleted and numbered and other lists related to diabetes. So surprise, this assignment is for the class Nutrition for Diabetes, which is linked here in Canvas. The assignment instructions for this assignment are pretty short. Create a 3-day menu appropriate for a patient with type 2 diabetes. The patient can be yourself or anyone else. You must state how many calories per day are required, state the percent breakdown of carbohydrates, protein, and fat in the diet for which you are creating the menu. You will be graded on variety and color for the types of foods you select. Complete the required information listed above, including tables 1, 2, and 3 in the form below, and use the links below as a guide. So that's all the instructions say, but to find the more thorough instructions, you need to go to the document Type 2 Diabetes Menu Instructions, which we'll walk through here before we return to talking about formatting lists and tables. So when you open that document, it starts with this. Create a 3-day menu appropriate for an assigned patient with type 2 diabetes. You must state how many calories per day are required. State the percent breakdown of carbohydrates, protein, and fat in the diet for which you are creating the menu. And then complete tables 1 through 3. So this would imply that you can just fill out this worksheet as they have given it to you for the assignment. Determine how many kilocalories the patient needs using the Mifflin-St. Jeor equation and show your work. Remember, based on this equation, you need to multiply it by an activity factor, how much activity the person does per day, and take off kilocalories per day if they need to lose weight. Explain your calculations and determine percentages of carbohydrate, protein, and fat according to the recommendations. So on the worksheet, under these instructions, they have this list, which is why we're talking about lists. So we've got calories, carbohydrate percent, protein percent, fat percent, and they have left a space to the right of it, which is translated here, where if you need to show your work, that's where you can show your work. After you do that, you need to fill in tables 1, 2, and 3. So for table 1, you need to determine how many servings of each food group are required to provide the number of kilocalories the patient needs, and to provide the percent of carbohydrates, proteins, and fat that you listed. Make sure you use the diabetic exchange lists, which we talked about earlier in my table note. Write the number of servings of each food group in the servings column. So if you look at that list and a person trying to achieve your goals needs 12 servings of bread and starch, you would put 12 under that column next to bread and starch. Then you would complete the rest of the table. If you have 6 servings of bread and starch, you would have 90 grams of carbohydrates because you have 6 servings times 15 grams per serving, and that makes 90. For protein, you would have 18 grams, which is 6 servings times 3 grams per serving in that column. And then for kilocalories, you would multiply the grams for each macronutrient by the kilocalories per gram for each nutrient and add those for the total on the bottom. So you basically just need to walk through the instructions for each of these exchange groups and the number of servings you determine you need for your patient. Then we have table 2. For table 2, you take the number of servings of each food group and spread the servings of each food group among the meals and snacks for the day, and you're going to fill in this table. So if they need 6 bread and starch servings total, you want to divide them out through the day. Do you want 2 at breakfast, 2 at lunch, 1 at a snack, and 1 at dinner? You just want to make sure that whatever you have in those the rightmost columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 6 columns on the right should add up to the second column, total number of servings. Then for table 3, you need to take the pattern that you made in table 2 and plug in foods to match the pattern of the food groups. So if table 2 showed you wanted 2 bread starches, 1 milk, 1 vegetable, 1 fruit, 3 meats, and 1 fat at lunch, then you can have these filled into the table. 1 hamburger bun, which is 2 breads, 8 ounces of skim milk, which is 1 milk, 1 cup of baby carrots, which is a vegetable, 1 small apple, which is your fruit, 3 meats. They've got a 3-ounce hamburger patty is 3 meats, and 1 tablespoon of mayonnaise would be your 1 fat. So you're going to fill in the table using that information. Plug in the appropriate foods with the appropriate food group box. So, for instance, those baby carrots for lunch are going to go under the lunch column in the vegetable row. And use the same pattern for all 3 days for table 3. They actually have 3 of these tables that you need to fill out. There will be table 3 day 1, table 3 day 2, and table 3 day 3.
Now, question, Emmy,
Yes, Sarah.
because we just went over how to format tables according to APA, and one thing I'm noticing about all these tables, they don't have the italicized title underneath. Is that okay?
Well, according to this assignment, it looks like you are allowed to just fill in the worksheet as it's given to you. You can certainly check with your instructor to make sure, or you could get fancy and convert everything to APA format. If you want to do that, that would be super. But it looks like you probably don't necessarily need to use APA in the formatting for this particular assignment. That said, it did give us a great opportunity to talk about both lists and tables, which we're going to continue looking at as soon as we look at the assignment rubric. So in this assignment, you have 40 points for filling in that list right at the top, listing the kilocalories, the percent carbohydrates, percent protein, and percent fat. You get 50 calories for table 1, which is where you come up with the exchange servings for each food group. You get 60 points for table 2, which is where you fill in the different number of servings for each food group. And then most of your assignment points are coming from what they're calling table 3, but remember that's actually 3 different tables where you're making the menu. And what is not reiterated in this rubric, but was in the initial assignment instructions, is that remember, you will be graded on variety and color of the food choices. So if you tell them to eat carrots for every meal, every vegetable, that's not variety. You probably want to throw in some red, yellow, blue, green, purple, orange foods to make sure you have a rainbow of healthy choices. So Sarah just mentioned that these things did not look like they were in APA format. So Sarah is going to help me walk through so just we can use this as practice to help us review how to use the checklists and how to make sure things are in APA format. So Sarah, do you have the handy dandy checklist ready?
Almost. I almost do.
That's okay. It takes us time to find checklists, but if long as you know where they are, you can go to it when you need it, right?
Holler to that. Okay. My computer's just being a little tiny bit slow
That's okay.
because it's Wednesday
Computers are slow
or just
these days. It's already
yes,
tired.
that's a legit thing. Didn't you know? Okay.
But wait, it's Thursday where you are.
Yes, but it's Wednesday for y'all. I'm being affected. That's the problem. The computer's not sure what day it is.
That probably is the problem.
Okay. Oh my gosh, no. Why can't I find it? I literally just had it pulled up and now it's nowhere in sight. Okay, no. So
While Sarah is still looking for her checklists, I will start by recalling what the first item in the checklist for lists was, which was that we need to figure out what kind of list to use to begin with.
yes.
So remember that the first type of list was a simple list where it was just part of one sentence. That is obviously not what we have here. It's not a complex list that's part of a sentence that will be separated by semicolons either. And since this is not in a linear sentence, we won't be using the lettered format either. So that takes us to our other options, which were a bulleted list and a
Hmm.
numbered list. So a numbered list has to be complete sentences and it has to denote a sequence. So Sarah, would we use a numbered list here?
That is a great question. Mm, yes, because there is an order to how we're doing things.
Is it a complete sentence though? Because remember, a numbered list has to be a complete sentence.
You are correct. So, no, because we're just answering.
That's right. So I agree. I would probably use a bulleted list. If you wanted to use a numbered list to argue that there is a particular reason for the order, you would need to rewrite the items as complete sentences. But for simplicity, we'll stick with bulleted list. So let's see.
Okay.
Did you find the checklist yet?
Yeah, okay, yes, I did find the checklist.
Yes.
This is the formatting tables
Okay.
checklist, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Formatting
yes, I
lists.
did find that one. So, our first question is, does the table have a bolded label and italicized title both in title case?
Oh, that's for the next slide. We need to talk about just the list right now. Let's
Just the
see.
list.
Let's see if I can remember because I don't have it in front of me either. But since we picked the type of list, which would be the bulleted list, we're going to just go through the checklist for what are the characteristics of a bulleted list. So remember, for a bulleted list, you can have bullets, which we don't have here. So we would need to add some bullets. We also can have either full sentences or words slash phrases, and the words or phrases would need to be in the same grammatical form, which we do have that here. Calories, carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Usually, we're going to have a sentence before our bulleted list, and that means that the items in the list are going to start with lowercase. So here's what this list would look like in APA format. So let's say we have the recommended calories and percentages of carbohydrates, protein, and fat for the patient are as follows: 1,500 calories, 60% carbohydrates, 30% protein, and 10% fat. If we wanted to keep it the way that they had it, we could have calories, 1,500, CHO 60%, protein 30%, fat 10%. They would start with lowercase letters, and we would not have any end punctuation after them because those are very short, simple items. Now, Sarah has our checklist for this one. Let's go through the table format, which is more complicated.
Dun dun dun.
Go for
All
it.
right, our table checklist. I want to be sure I'm asking you the right questions. Um, so do we have our bolded label?
We have a label and it's bolded, but it's also combined with day one, which should not be part of the label. That would need to go in the title of the table. So
So that
that's
would
a
be
half
our
check.
italicized. So that would be our
Yes,
italicized title.
we could have diabetes menu day one as the title underneath the bolded label, and that would be in italics and not in bold, but it would have all the major words capitalized.
So are they both in title case?
They are both in title case, so we would just need to hit enter there, add a little bit more to day one to make it a title, and switch that from bold to italics.
Okay, we can
Okay.
do that.
Yep.
Is the table called out in your text, as in see table, fill in the number?
Well, I don't have any text, but I would need to make sure that I had a C table 3 in the paragraph before this or somewhere in the paper if I were putting the table at the end.
Okay. Have you eliminated all vertical borders?
No, there's lots of those, so I would need to go into that settings menu that you showed us and get rid of those.
Okay. Have you eliminated horizontal grid lines to the top or bottom and to set off rows with the headings or summary information?
So I have one at the top and the bottom, and I have one under the heading. But those lines between, for instance, fruit and milk, those lines in there would need to be eliminated. And we actually don't have a totals row on this, so we would just have the one at the top, the one under the headings, and the one at the bottom. So we'd need to use those tools that you showed us to get rid of those lines too.
Mhm. Do we have a heading that's centered for each column?
We have headings for each column. Some of them are centered, but I think serving size and breakfast food are not. So we would need to switch that to make that centered.
And are they capitalized?
They are capitalized in title case. Is that what we're supposed to use for headings?
No, we're aiming for sentence case.
Well, that's right. So all those words that say food and size and group, those would need to be in lowercase.
All right. So how about the body of the text? Is it left aligned, at least for the leftmost column?
Yes, it is. So we have a check for that one. Bread, starch, fruit, and
Yay!
milk, those are all left aligned.
Ding,
Woohoo!
ding, ding, yay! Is the text in the other cells centered?
Well, we don't have any
Or
text yet because this is not filled in because it's just
okay,
copied right
but
from the worksheet, but we would center it if we were.
okay. Okay, so we would center it as we fill it out,
Yeah,
or possibly left align it if necessary to make it more
right.
readable.
If we thought it looked better to have the breakfast foods left aligned, we could do that.
Okay. Is all the, as we're filling in, are we filling it in with sentence case?
Well, we don't know yet, but we would.
That's what we would aim for.
We would
Okay.
make sure that bread and starch, for instance, only had that B capitalized because the S should not be capitalized if we're using sentence case.
Is our table formatted with single or 1.5 or double spacing?
I think it's single space, so I think that's pretty consistent and would be fine.
Okay. Okay. Yay, another check.
Yay.
And have we reduced the font size so that it is on one page?
It's on one page.
Okay. Yay.
Yay.
Another check mark. Yay, we're getting
Check
towards the end.
mark.
We're getting a bit more check marks. Um, have is it necessary to add a note at the end of like under the table?
Well, I think that would be determined after we fill it in. If the person who was filling it in thought that some necessary information simply was not explained well in what was already in the table.
Mhm.
So that would
So,
be up to the person making it.
yeah. So I mean, we towards the end of our checklist, we had a lot of things that were already good to go.
Hmm. But we had some things that were not. And one
Yeah.
thing, oh, that we did not go over in that version of the checklist was our table is supposed to be in the same font style as the rest of
Mm-hmm.
our paper. So table 3 day 1, that looks like it's Times New Roman 12. That is not Times New Roman 12 in that table. So we would need to convert that to Times New Roman 12. And this would probably fit on one page, so we wouldn't need to make the font smaller. But did we go through the whole list now?
Yeah, that was our whole checklist, and we
Awesome.
did pretty good. We had
Yeah.
a few tweaks to make, but overall,
Hmm.
um, and then of course once we filled it out, we might once we had the table all filled in, we might go over it again just to make sure that we
Just
did
make sure.
fill in those cells with sentence case text.
Yeah. So here is a reminder of what it might look like if this is actually a different table, the one that we already looked at earlier. But this is how it would look with the heading. I'm sorry, with the label and the title, the heading, the way things are lined up, and that minimalist use of vertical and horizontal borders, which is a real marker of APA tables that is different from how other people might make tables or people not
Hmm.
using APA format.
Yeah.
Um, they would
Yeah, and
probably have all those lines.
it seemed like for this assignment when we were looking at the rubric and everything, it never mentioned AP being APA or
Mhm.
formatting it in
Yep,
APA.
it's not
So
in
for
the.
this assignment, it was literally here's your tables, fill them out, submit.
Yep. But again, it did give us a fun time to talk about how to format our lists and our tables and practice
Yes, it
using
did.
handy dandy checklists. So we have hit the end of our webinar practicing with our lists and our tables. During tonight's webinar, we used several examples to understand how to format lists in APA style, understand how to format tables in APA style, and we workshopped NUTR 627's Week 2 assignment to the 3-day menu, where you will be filling in that worksheet, doing all sorts of fun calculations to figure out how to assist the patient with diabetes. Before we finish up, we are going to tell you a little bit more about our online writing center. You can check out the online writing center group in my ACU. On the second line, you can click that link to watch this video for the steps to make an appointment and submit your paper. We will work with you at absolutely any stage of your writing, including if you need help with formatting lists and tables. We have 2 types of appointments on the schedule. Email asynchronous appointments are when you upload your paper and the tutor sends you feedback by email within 24 hours. The title of that email will be Writing Center Report. You can also make a Zoom appointment. to talk one-on-one with me or Sarah, because we both do Zoom and we would love to chat with you. At the time of your appointment, you would just go to the schedule and click on the Zoom link at the appointment time, which is in Central Time. Sarah is our Zoom queen, so she would love to talk with you, and I do them too. So please come chat about tables, lists, or anything else. You can access many writing related resources on our online writing center website. Our submission process is super easy. You schedule an appointment at our platform, which is called WC Online, and then you upload your paper to the appointment form. You can make an appointment up to 2 weeks ahead of time. So if you don't have your paper ready when you make the appointment, don't worry about it. You can upload your paper 1 minute before your appointment, and we will still be able to access it. You upload it right to the appointment form with your appointment. You can contact us at Online Writing Center at acu.edu. Click the second link to schedule an appointment. The third link will take you to our Online Writing Center website. We have so many resources. We have our APA course paper template in which you could certainly embed your APA formatted lists and tables. We have a YouTube channel at that tiny URL link and our Online Writing Center blog at the third link. We have loads of other webinars talking about many, many facets of writing, including APA style. If you are really obsessed with lists the way that I am, which is why I volunteered for this webinar and the one advertised here, we'll be working on creating the easy to read list on Thursday, November 14th at 6 p.m. Central Time, where we're going to talk even more about lists using another NUTR 627 assignment. So come have more list fun with me. And that concludes our webinar. We thank you so much for learning with us today. And if you have any questions, you can certainly email us at that address, or when we cut the recording, you are welcome to ask them now. So we will say goodbye. Say bye, Sarah.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
Opposite of ahoy to say goodbye.
I'll look into that.
We need to figure that one out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, bye.
Can it be like aloha? Because they say that for hello and goodbye in
That's
Hawaii. So
true. Maybe
can
ahoy
I
would
just
work
double
both
use it?
ways. I don't know. I gotta look that up. You can make a
All
bulleted
right.
list about options. Bye, everybody.